So that's an important thing to think about. When we talk to each other, and that's why I put you in breakout rooms to introduce each other, how many of you, by a show of hands, talked about what you do or what you sell? Don't be shy. How many of you talked about it? Because we do that. BNI, corporate connections, we all do that. We make sense of each other. We try to contextualize each other through what we do, which is frustrating for those of us when we lose our jobs because we've lost that sense of identity. So it's okay. That's how we do it. I find it so frustrating when we walk up to someone. I'm like, hey, so what do you do? As opposed to, hey, what makes you awesome? I mean, they'd probably look at you funny. What have you done that like you're super proud of? Because some people stay at home and parent full time, which if you've done full-time parenting at home, you know that's harder than most 9-to-5 jobs. Way more difficult. So it's interesting how many of us default to this is what I do, but it's not what we do. It's the stories around that. And so the big question is why? Why does it work that way? Well, I'm going to get into the most scientific part of this, and this is not my forte as an actor. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist, though I did play one in a commercial once, which is about as close as I get to that credential. Paul Zak, though, is a neuroscientist and an author out of the U.S., which is his research really identifying that oxytocin is the neurochemical that is responsible for empathy and narrative transportation. And more importantly, that character-driven stories consistently cause oxytocin synthesis. So the oxytocin is that part in the brain in the hypothalamus, and that's where we get love, we get empathy, we get trust. And so when we meet somebody, and if that oxytocin kicks in, we either like them instantly, we trust them instantly, and in business, we want to do business with them. And so Paul's research shows that good storytelling kicks that in. So the amount of oxytocin released by the brain could predict how much people were willing to help. So for example, if you told a really great story about how a charity helped someone and it got you, like it really got you, in the way that sometimes a phone commercial will make me cry, but it literally gets you, and you're suddenly going, yeah, I'll give. Where do I give? Where do I write the check? And that's because the story has triggered that oxytocin. So that by knowing somebody's story, where they came from, what they do, but even more importantly, why they do it and what we have in common, we can actually create these relationships with strangers. So that brings us to, how do you tell a story? And I don't want to get into like the filmatic or the linguistic or Plato's idea of how do you tell a story. We'll keep it really simple, because really there's 3 things you need to be able to tell a story. The first one is you have to keep it simple. Keep it simple. Most of us, even while we're talking to you, we're probably not listening because we're thinking about what we're about to say, or we're thinking about our story. Now, show of hands, how many people, when the other person was introducing, you were kind of listening, but you're also thinking about what you were going to say? I do it all the time. I get nervous. And so I'm listening to them. I'm trying to multitask. And as a man, I've proven more than once that I'm incapable of multitasking. There's a lot of research that says we can't multitask. It's just our brain going back and forth, doing neither really well. So the first thing is keep it simple. Cut through the noise by keeping it simple. The second thing is you should have an emotional quality to your story. Give them a reason to feel something in the story. And maybe it's tension. Sometimes when we're talking in our business, we solve problems all the day. Sometimes when we're solving a problem for our client, it's a big problem. So you can think about it in context of, I helped solve this problem, this person had this and that, and instantly I'm like, ooh, I want to hear how this ends. Or I had a client that came in and was really struggling with this and was at a real crossroads. And instantly I'm like, and what happened? So there's an emotional context to it. There's a struggle. There's friction. Even good comedy. If you like watching comedy, the best comedians, right before the biggest laugh, there's a tension. It gets uncomfortable sometimes. They've built an awkwardness or something that then the joke relieves. And that's why there's a laugh. So emotional. Find a reason for them to emotionally care about this story you're telling. And the third one is authenticity. And to me, that's everything. And so oftentimes when I'm working with people in my community or new launch directors or chapter directors who are wanting to say, do we have a script? How do I reach out to people? I'm like, unfortunately, I don't. Because I know how to talk to people from my story, from my context, from the vantage point that I have in my life experience, but I don't know how to do it from yours. And I can only be me. I can only do me. That's it. So that authenticity. So when you're telling your story, understand it's your story. It's not anyone else's. And you can look at it from your company's story too. And this is where authenticity is key. Every company has an incredible story to tell. Your origin story, the myth, the reason why your company came from nothing and now today is a company. And if it's not authentic and you have employees, they won't take you seriously. I worked for a company where it was really cool. It was virtual reality, and we created this incredible culture. Unfortunately, we didn't live it. We sold it. We talked about it. We put it in our t-shirts, put it up on the walls. Our website talked all about it. And the employees were like, that would be cool if that was true. It wasn't authentic. And so we had staff turnover. And ultimately, that company went bankrupt because it wasn't authentic. So the story has to be simple. There has to be an emotional context to it, and it has to be authentic. Now, there's one other piece that's missing here, which is message. If you think back to Marshall McLuhan, medium is the message. Message is everything. Because when we're selling something, when we're trying to get someone to buy us or our company, there's a message attached to it, usually which is, I'm the solution to your problem. So how do you weave your message into it? Well, it's easy. It's a simple message. It's an emotional message. But most importantly, it's an authentic message. So what I want to do now, and I'm going to make Shannon work really hard here, is I'm going to put you into your second breakout session. So Shannon's now going to pair you all back up again, and you're going to share a story about yourself. But you're going to keep it simple. You're going to keep it emotional. And you're going to keep it authentic. And so this is your opportunity, and I'm talking short. Now, the shorter the story, the harder it is to write. I'll be honest, this is not necessarily fair on my part, but I want you to try, and I want you to really share with each other a short story, whether it's your origin story or your company's origin story. Keep it simple, keep it emotional, but most importantly, keep it authentic. Shannon, are you ready? Okay, so go ahead. Let's open up the breakout rooms. Maybe we can move Vahid to, it's assigned to, where's he? To 18? No. Or Sahil and Vahid, are you guys? I guess they're going to just kind of hang out with us. You're on mute, Shannon.
Just going to move a different person into that room so she's not all on her own. Just give me a 1 minute warning when you want to close them.
We'll do. So we finish at
1:45.
1:45. So 1:35 would give us 10 minutes for Q&A.
Perfect.
We got lots of time. I wanted to go through it and give them lots of time to kind of share a moment. It's so short, 20 minutes.
popped into a breakout room earlier and they were having a pretty good chat. So.
Okay, good. I mean, there's entire novels written on this subject. It's a fascinating subject. It's an art form, but hopefully the three things: keep it simple, keep it emotional, and keep it authentic.
So true. And I did figure out the recording, so we're good there.
Okay, good. Oh yes, I see the blinking red light.
The button's not showing up, so I was having a moment of panic.
I couldn't see it either because I think you made me co-host, and yeah, I was like, yeah, let's give him the 1 minute. And now people will start coming in because they pressed the button by accident. I do that all the time. I get annoyed with it in my face and I'm like, oh, and then I leave the room. Let's see.
There we go. Hello, welcome back. Everybody else is just finishing up their conversations.
Is it late where you are, Robert?
You're on mute, Robert.
You're still on mute.
It's 5:30 a.m. now.
5:30. So that's early. So it's not quite breakfast time for you.
No, not quite.
I appreciate.
I've certainly had one cup of coffee, and there's more on its way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we'll give everyone else a chance to pop in there. There we go.
Here they come. Welcome back.
So welcome back, everyone. I just wanted, by show of hands, who felt that the second breakout, and it was a little bit longer, so it's unfair maybe to ask this way, but who felt that the second breakout session was more productive than the first breakout session in terms of connecting? No. So who felt that the first breakout session was more productive? Show of hands.
I did. Is it okay if I speak?
Well, it's too late now. You're already speaking. Of course, it's okay.
Good.
No, yeah.
Okay. So for me, the first one was more productive, partially because there were tech issues and I was in 2 breakout rooms by myself. By the time we got into a room, we basically had 60 seconds left. But I think that the pressure of like tell a story and make it authentic was way harder to think of something to say versus just introduce yourself. So yeah.
But I think, and I hear what you're saying, and I get that, and I think what I would say is, you know, if you can understand how to introduce yourself through storytelling enables people to focus, and most of us don't focus well. There's so many distractions, and yet we are hardwired to focus on narrative. It's why, you know, it's how we learn. And there's so many studies that show that if you teach even using narrative, and that's, you know, if we look at, especially in the Western Judeo-Christian culture, or any culture that's heavily based on storytelling, it's how we make sense of the world is through narrative, through story, through parable, through any of these things. And a lot of good business books, and this is why I like Seth Godin so much, a lot of his stories are parables. There's another one, I don't have it in front of me, Steve Farber, which his love is just damn good business. But there's another one he wrote, it's all story. And I can never tell if was it a real story or did he craft this story to get the message across. But it's such a beautiful story that I read it in one sitting. It was like an hour. I just sat there and just chugged through it, and I couldn't put it down. It's the same thing when I read Lord of the Rings as a kid. It was 2 weeks you didn't see me because I couldn't put the book down. And so it's the same thing when we meet people. If you hone your ability to tell stories, people will understand you better and want to hear more, or say, wow, this is somebody I want to spend more time with. And if you get good at shortening that story so you get your message across faster, especially if you're embedding a sales cycle in it, your customers will be able to understand you better and maybe want to buy your product. And if you have employees, you have to get really good at telling the company story. Because as owners, we all assume everybody understands why we built the company and what the company's about. But if you ask 10 employees, you probably have 10 different versions of the story, unless you've done a great job at building that culture and making sure everyone understands that story. And so if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, very big on social media and that marketing. And he says storytelling is by far the most underrated skill in business. And I don't care if you're in a startup, if you're an established company, if you're new to BNI, if you've been in BNI 15 years, we can all get better at storytelling. Because if you're raising capital, if you're looking for new customers, if you're doing anything in our society, understand that good storytelling makes it so much easier for people to understand not only who we are, but why we are. And that makes them create an affinity. And I don't mean liking. If you look at the true definition of affinity, it's an understanding. You want people to understand you. If you want people to understand you, tell an incredible story. So what I want to do is I'm going to open it up to questions because we have about 5 minutes. And so if you have a question, feel free to put your hand up. We'll call on you, or just unmute yourself, but then it may get crazy if there's a bunch of questions. 4.5 minutes. Don't be shy.
Trevor, what are your thoughts about doing things in threes when you're speaking and telling a story? Is that applicable here or not?
Yeah, it is applicable. I mean, a lot of comedians will tell a joke 3 times to get the biggest laugh on the third one. There's a lot of examples in literature, even in certain religious things, everything comes in threes. So you can't go wrong with necessarily doing things in threes. I'm a bit of a maverick, so I don't follow hard and fast rules, which is keep it simple, make it emotional, make it authentic, is as close as I would get to rules. But again, if you look at number 3, it's got to be authentic. So it has to work for you. So if you try to shoehorn yourself into, here's my formula, it may not work for you. It may feel rigid or that. And again, your story is your story. You know, no one can tell you how to write it or how to do it. So structure may not help. But yeah, there's certainly a case to be made for that. Standard film is in 3 acts. You'll see all across our culture, the things are in 3s. So there's reason there, but.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Anyone else? 3 minutes.
Kim posted in the chat, stories are so powerful. Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence others is a key concept for connecting, was telling a story about yourself. So there I was as an example. So that's great. Thanks, Kim.
One of the things I would say is to add on to authentic is personal. Right? When you're telling a personal story that you've lived, it makes it so much easier to tell. You don't have to memorize anything. And in public speaking, very often they'll say, you're talking in 3s, is refer back to your point during your presentation. So these some of the ways you can do storytelling, and they'll teach you that when in some public speaking courses that you actually take.
Yeah, I mean, every speech I've ever done, I started with a story because I want people to understand me or understand the context from which I'm coming from. So I was speaking in Dubai, and the first thing I led off with was a story that let everybody in the room understand that I'd worked in hotels and I had experience in there, and I had my fair share of, issues. Some of my hardest lessons came, waiting tables, and certainly ate some humble pie there. So I think it's always important, if you want people to understand you, is to give them context, and the easiest way is through storytelling. So even I've been sold stuff where the salesperson, I asked them a question and they gave me a story, and I forgot that I'd asked them a question, and I'm suddenly going, okay, yeah, I'll buy that. That's amazing. It was so effortless. But there's someone who honed their craft and understood how to suss out exactly what I was looking for, and then tell me a story where I was the hero of that story. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. I'll take it. And that's our job is if you really want people to buy whatever it is that you're doing, is to find a story. And I agree, personal is everything. But to me, that falls under authenticity. If it's not your story, it won't be authentic.
Sure.
Anyone else? Well, look, I'll take the last minute to thank, first off, Shannon, for being an awesome Zoom Jedi and for keeping me on my toes and managing the breakout rooms. Most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you, especially the BNI members that are on this call. Great respect for what you do as members. And I'm so proud to be part of the Canadian community. And for those who don't know, Kai Bjorn is my business partner with Corporate Connections. And my introduction into the community was through BNI. I attended a chapter meeting and just fell in love with the enthusiasm, but also the willingness to help and that openness. So thank you very much to each and every one of you.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you everyone for joining us.